The financial system as we know it just changed overnight thanks to an obscure 3-number rule, and Bitcoin is at the center of it all. Now, for years, banks have been locked out of Bitcoin because of one controversial SEC rule that's been challenged and vetoed by Biden, but in a stunning turn of events, the rule's been overturned. And note, this isn't just a policy shift. It's the beginning of a complete fundamental change in how Bitcoin fits into the global financial system. And no matter what you know about this, you're not bullish enough. All right, so what is this obscure 3-number rule we're talking about? Well, this is SAB 121.
With the repeal of SAB 121, Bitcoin is entering a new phase of adoption, paving the way for massive growth. Mark Moss, a seasoned entrepreneur and investor, highlights that the Trump administration's move and Gary Gensler's departure from the SEC has opened doors for banks to custody Bitcoin and create related financial products. This is a game changer, as mainstream access to Bitcoin will fuel demand and drive its value higher. Stick around as Mark Moss dives deeper into SAB 121 and how its repeal could trigger a massive rally.
All right, so what is this obscure 3-number rule we're talking about? Well, this is SAB 121. Huh? Well, what does that mean? Well, SAB, Staff Accounting Bulletin. And basically, this was issued by the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, back in 2022, and it established the crypto accounting standards. Now, the important thing to know about this is it was not a law, it was not a regulation, it wasn't passed through the regular means in the United States of going through Congress. This was by the SEC themselves, and so this was actually just a bulletin. It was like a note. This is like sort of what we think. And basically what it did is it set this requirement, this bulletin of how banks should think about accounting standards for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And basically what it did is it required the banks to hold Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies on their books as a liability. And that means for a liability, they need to have a matching asset as well, and that created a problem for them. Now, the important thing to understand is that, again, this was not a law, it was not a regulation, it was a bulletin. Now, why is that? Well, that is because, you have to understand this piece, it's because the Biden administration, including Elizabeth Warren, including Gary Gensler as the head of the SEC, were very, very anti-crypto. As a matter of fact, Elizabeth Warren ran on a platform called an anti-crypto army, literally. Figuratively. Now, I didn't understand, and I actually asked ChatGPT when this came out, when has a United States America politician ever ran on a platform to take away freedoms? Which would be weird in the land of the free. And ChatGPT said, never. But Elizabeth Warren did. She ran on a platform to take away your rights to hold assets as you see fit, which is pretty interesting. So you can see Elizabeth Warren, Gary Gensler, and Biden were very anti-cryptocurrency, very anti-freedom. And so what happened is, instead of going through the regular means of going and changing the laws, they decided to go around and do something sly in a roundabout way. And so what they did is the SEC completely bypassed Congress. So instead of going through the regular channels of making a law, what they did is they issued this bulletin. And this bulletin said, hey, this is the risk that we see. This is what we think you should do. And, you know, it's not a law, but if you don't do this, be prepared for us to come in and fine you and shut you down and all types of things. And so it completely bypassed Congress in that way. And it fast-tracked, strong-armed its implementation. Some concerns of the SEC's actions were that it had lack of due process. So because they circumvented Congress, the SEC ignored the proper process. It had regulatory overreach, so it created new laws through a threat of enforcement. So this was how the Biden regime did things. They threaten people. If they don't do what they want, then they're going to be raked through the coals. Now, in that bulletin, they showed sort of the technological risk, the legal risk, the regulatory risk that were posed. And basically what they said here is this was required. So they're telling you, if you don't do this, be prepared, we're coming after you. So guess what happened? Well, the banks didn't get involved. They wanted to, and the banks started missing out. The banks saw everybody making all this money in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, Of course, they wanted in, but they couldn't because they were fearful of what the SEC would do. And so then what did the banks do? Well, if we can't make money, then we're not going to let anybody participate. And so you saw things where the banks were potentially not letting you transfer money from the bank to an exchange like Coinbase, for example. Like my own bank, one of the banks I use, won't let me transfer money. So for example, but the problem is the banks were losing customers. They could see people pulling money out and sending it to cryptocurrency exchanges, and banks were very sticky. They don't want to lose those customers because they'll lose out a lot of potential income. Now, again, they wanted to switch over, but they were fearful of this hostile administration. Again, Gensler, Biden, and Warren. So what did they do? Well, they did what you're supposed to do in America, which is they started to have a legislative movement, and they submitted a bill to get SAB 121 rescinded. So the SEC wouldn't have this hanging over their head. And they got it through last year through the Senate. The Senate approved it. They got it through the House approved it to repeal it. Then it got all the way to Biden's desk, and he vetoed it. So the will of the American people, the banks, the Senate, the House, all said, get rid of this bulletin. You shouldn't have that power. And the President Biden, vetoed it, or whoever had his stamp at the time. We don't know. So basically what happened, you can see here, Biden vetoes the resolution to overturn it. This was last year with Biden's angry face. Like I said, probably wasn't him. So what happened then? Well, the American people voted and they got Biden out and they put Trump in. Trump came in, he gave this speech at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville last year. And he basically said, fire Gary Gensler on day one. He said, we've seen all the persecution that's happened to the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space by the SEC, and we're going to get rid of it. We're going to fire him. So the American people spoke, as it's supposed to be done, and Trump came in. Now, this is where things get interesting, and not just interesting, but very powerful.
Trump's presidency is driving major changes for the crypto industry, and it's catching attention. Crypto firms heavily backed his campaign in 2024, and Congress now has more pro-crypto lawmakers. Trump has acted quickly, pardoning Silk Road founder Ross Ulbricht, overturning SEC rule SAB 121 to allow banks to engage with crypto, and pushing for clear regulations, a Bitcoin reserve, and a ban on CBDCs. With Trump in office, crypto is no longer fighting to survive, but is poised for a breakthrough. Now let's hear more from Mark Moss.
So here comes the bank. So what happened is Trump has so far kept his word. He's done a lot of things he said he was going to do, like, for example, close the borders. He freed Ross on day one, and he got rid of Gary Gensler at the head of the SEC. So he stepped down, and immediately SAB 121 was rescinded. The very thing that was holding the banks back, the financial system back, the very thing that they tried to get rid of, that Biden wouldn't let go of, it's over. So that's been rescinded, and now the banks are coming with adoption. You can see breaking, SEC officially rescinds SAB 121, which prevented banks from custodying Bitcoin. So if the banks can custody Bitcoin, that means now they could hold it on behalf of their customers. They could sell it to their customers. They could sell it and hold it. They could do all types of financial products, lending products, hedging products, all types of financial products, which of course is what they want to do. Now, if the banks do this, this brings adoption. Why? Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it makes it accessible to millions, not millions, hundreds of millions of people. People already have bank accounts. If I can just click a button and add Bitcoin in my bank account, it makes it very easy, very accessible. Number two, it adds legitimacy and trust. I mean, I don't know about this magic internet money. I don't know about this exchange. I mean, I got to set up this account and I somehow have to send them money. It seems kind of sketchy. But if my money is already in my bank, who I trust, Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America, and I can click a button to add Bitcoin, it adds legitimacy and trust. I trust the bank to hold my money. I can trust the bank to hold my Bitcoin. It also then, as I said, allows the banks to introduce all types of new products. They want to do this. Let me show you exactly what they're saying. We have here a message from Bank of America CEO, Brian Moynihan. He said, if the rules come in and make it a real thing you can actually do business with, you'll find that the banking system will come in hard. Quote, come in hard. What does hard mean? Well, I have some numbers for you. He says they're going to come in hard. So Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, some of the biggest banks in the world are coming in hard. But what does hard really mean? Well, here we have BlackRock not arguably, the biggest financial firm in the world, I think $11.5 trillion in assets, BlackRock, it's not their money. It's not $11.5 trillion of their money. It's your money. It's your pension, your retirement fund. They manage it on your behalf. BlackRock is now telling everybody that they manage money for that they recommend Bitcoin portfolio weighting of up to 2%. Up to 2%. The largest financial firm in the world who manages more money for more people than anybody else is saying that everyone should have about a 2% weighting to Bitcoin. That's what hard looks like. Now, what would a 2% weighting mean? Well, the head of BlackRock, Larry Fink, just happened to tell us. He said that I was with a sovereign wealth fund during this week in Davos, and there was a conversation, should we have a 2% allocation or should we have a 5%? Not should we have one or not, but it's how big. And he said that if everybody adopted that conversation, when he says everybody, what he's talking about is if all the big funds, not every single person in the world, but all the big funds. If the funds would do that, if they'd have that conversation, we'd see Bitcoin up to $700,000 per Bitcoin. So that's $700,000 potentially a future value, and you can buy it for $100,000 today. Seems like a pretty good deal. I think Larry Fink is bullish, but maybe he's still not bullish enough. All right, let's keep going. Now, the reason why he may not be bullish enough is because you have to understand this isn't just that SAB 121 was rescinded, which it was. What this is it's really a signal, it's a shift, it's a fundamental transformation, it's a regime shift.
The repeal of SAB 121 is a game changer for Bitcoin, signaling a major shift in U.S. government policy toward crypto. With Trump's actions paving the way for institutional adoption, Bitcoin is entering a new phase. As banks begin offering Bitcoin services, demand is set to surge, driving its value higher. Bitcoin's future is brighter than ever. Don't miss out on the next big surge. Stay ahead of the game and subscribe now for the latest crypto updates.